Okay, fragrance notes. They sound simple enough until you're standing in a store, staring at a bottle that claims to smell like bergamot, white musk, and the memory of a forest after rain. And you have absolutely no idea what any of that means or whether you'll actually like it. Let's fix that. Here's how fragrance notes actually work, broken down into the three layers every fragrance has. Top notes are what you smell the second you spray a fragrance. They hit first, they hit hard, and they're usually sharp, fresh, or citrusy. First impressions and all that. Here's the thing though. Top notes are basically the fragrance's opening act. They're memorable, sure, but they fade fast. We're talking 15 to 30 minutes, and they're largely gone. This is really important to understand before you go shopping, because if you walk into a store, spray something on your wrist, sniff it immediately, and go, "Heh, not for me," you might be making a $150 mistake based on 10 seconds of information. I have fragrances in my collection that smell genuinely rough for the first 20 minutes. And then the top notes clear out and suddenly it's incredible. If I had judged those in the first sniff, I never would have bought them. So when you're testing a new scent, spray it, put your wrist down, go browse the store for 30 minutes, then smell it again. That's the real fragrance. One more thing. When a fragrance lists a note like rose or peach, that doesn't mean there's an actual rose or an actual peach in the bottle. It's usually a synthetic chemical designed to mimic that smell. And before you cringe at the word synthetic, the synthetic version is often better than the real ingredient. More consistent, more refined, longer lasting. The fragrance community sometimes acts allergic to that word, but the science doesn't lie. Notes describe what something smells like, not what it's made of. Also called heart notes, middle notes are what show up once the top notes start to fade. They overlap with the top notes rather than replacing them cleanly. It's more of a smooth handoff than a hard switch. You might not even notice the transition happening. While top notes are usually fresh and citrusy, middle notes tend to go warmer and more complex. Think spices like cinnamon, florals like rose or jasmine, or herbals like lavender. These are the notes that define the character of a fragrance. Middle notes stick around for anywhere from 2 to 6 hours depending on the fragrance. They're the backbone of what you're actually wearing throughout the day. Base notes are the deepest layer, the heaviest, richest part of the fragrance that anchors everything else. Think vanilla, woods, amber, musk. These are the notes that even an untrained nose picks up easily, and they're the ones that last the longest. Sometimes 8 to 12 hours on skin, and potentially days on clothing. Here's the single most important piece of advice in this entire video. Never buy a fragrance if you don't like the base notes. Full stop. The base notes are what you're going to be smelling on yourself for hours. Everything else fades. The base stays. If you don't vibe with it, you're going to be annoyed by your own cologne by 3 p.m. Don't do that to yourself. Bonus. Notes actually affect how long a fragrance lasts. Most people talk about longevity only in terms of concentration. EDT versus EDP, how much fragrance oil is in there? And yes, that matters, but the type of notes matters too. Heavier notes like vanilla, woods, and amber naturally cling to skin longer. Lighter, fresher notes, citrus, aquatics, evaporate faster. So a fresh summer fragrance is always going to feel shorter-lived than a heavy winter one, regardless of whether it's an EDP. Just something useful to keep in mind when you're wondering why your cologne disappeared by noon. Now, here's where I have to be honest with you. Everything I just explained, genuinely useful, also kind of limited. Let me explain. Notes give you a rough map of how a fragrance will smell. They don't give you the full picture. I learned this the hard way when I blind bought a fragrance based purely on its note list. Looked great on paper. Woody, a little fruity, interesting combination. I ordered it confidently. It arrived. It smelled like a grandmother's living room. If you know what notes you like, and you study a fragrance's profile carefully, you can get about 90% of the way there without smelling it first. But that 10% can be a surprise. The other thing to know, everyone's nose is genuinely different. I wore one of my fragrances to work recently. To me, it smells like vanilla and strawberry with a leather base. My coworker walked past and said I smelled like raspberry caramel. I cannot smell a single raspberry in that fragrance. And finally, the same note can smell completely different depending on the brand. A vanilla note in a budget designer fragrance and a vanilla note in something like Parfum de Marly, not the same experience at all. Quality of ingredients varies massively, so comparing notes across price ranges isn't always apples to apples. Fragrance notes are a great starting point. Just don't let them be your ending point too. Smell things in person when you can. Give them time to develop, and whatever you do, always check those bass notes before you buy.